Well, hello everyone. Thank you and welcome to the Tree of Life podcast, episode like 7 now or something. I don't even know it anymore.
Wow. Ah,
We've been doing this quite a bit. We've gone from spring to autumn now. This is our autumn equinox in a video podcast. Yeah.
yes.
I apologize to everyone. Hopefully there is no noise, but I am living the full digital nomad dream, and which means I'm podcasting at a cafe today. But I have my pumpkin spice latte, so everything's okay.
Hey, you've just declared it autumn in a latte right there.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know, where, our viewers are from necessarily watching this or listening to this in the sense that, this is my favorite time of year. For me, it's when I feel the most alive. And I think that's, a lot of people I talk to within like the pagan spheres, they feel the most alive when the cool weather starts to set in. And I also think this is because of, we feel the magics more this time of year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose it goes from being a time of outward expression to kind of inward, internal reflection, doesn't it? That kind of journeying back to the cave after a long, hard year, toiling the fields with hard work, and yeah, returning back around, getting back around the hearth with your community.
Yeah. Yeah. And just, we were both talking before the show about the holidays from like September, September 21st ish being the equinox. And it seems like as far as like pagan holidays, you have Mabon and the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. But I'll let you kind of attest more to this, Kubi. But I've always known it as kind of like the made up holiday. Is that kind of true? Like,
Yeah, yeah. In some ways, it's got a little bit of there is some backstory to it, but it's an interesting one because sort of 5,000 years ago, we know our Neolithic ancestors would have celebrated the autumn equinox, not known as Mabon then, but it would have been like they had there's a stone structure which is Neolithic in Ireland, Longcrew, which is connected to the Hag of Winter, the Cailleach, and it has it sort of illuminates with the rising sun of the autumn equinox, which is interesting. And I think there's a lot of people sort of would argue that it was used well into the Celtic Iron Age. There's some evidence that suggests that. So potentially our Celtic ancestors would have celebrated this time. But in terms of it being called Mabon, that's actually quite a neo-pagan thing, which was kind of latched onto it, which is connected with the god. It's a Welsh god, Mabon, whose name means divine sun, and the sun and sun, both meanings. It sort of represents the innocence of youth and the strength of survival and the sort of growing wisdom of years that a man goes through. And in the book of Taliesin, he refers to Mabon as the chief of the glittering West. So it's the idea of the kind of, if there was such a thing as the Celtic sort of
their wheel.
yeah, Celtic wheel kind of thing. It would be
Yeah.
sort of the autumn would represent the West and the water and the setting sun.
Yeah. I mean, what a badass
So
name. Like Chief of the Glittering West.
no, it's
What?
lovely, isn't it?
I want that title. That's cool. I think I'm just gonna start introducing myself. Like I want it to say next to PSL, Chief of the Glittering West.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Put that on your CV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so quite nice kind of mental images that come with Mabon as a god. And the Druids also referred to this time as Alban Elfed, which means the light of the water. So very similar connection there. They see it as a time of completion and honouring all sort of projects that began in the spring equinox. So sort of assessing and looking back over the year. But really, it's a time of coming back together. It's a time of stopping working, going back into rest, sort of accepting that the last season is sort of here before they go into the darker half of the year. And there's a lot of talk about, like in Colc and Olwyn, which is a story in the Mabinogion, which is the Welsh stories we have here in folklore. It recounts the story of Mabon being imprisoned for a long period of time. And so almost sort of seeing the opportunity to recharge and to imprison ourselves inside our houses for another 6 months, but with the idea of sort of valiantly rising back. He eventually rises back onto the battlefield with King Arthur many months later. So it's a similar notion of going into rest, having your seasonal death rebirth and coming back out in the spring. A good time to sort of fluff up the cushions, prepare the nest for cozy times.
The opposite of spring cleaning.
The absolute opposite of that. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
Eat
that's
lots.
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but and I think it's mostly because it's not necessarily historical, but like the Norse, we have very little stuff that goes on in September.
Yeah.
Um, but at this time of year, the only surviving thing was something called winter nights,
Mm.
and the idea was preparing the house for winter. And so some kind of celebration or ceremony or ritual to prepare the house for the coming winter. So whether that's moving, things inside, moving the animals inside, because you figure in Scandinavia right now, the weather is plummeting. This time of
Oh,
year,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
we go from having
Yeah.
eternal sunshine to very quickly by the equinox, you are almost to winter again, almost to eternal darkness. And so this time of year was the year to prepare for winter, because of how harsh it was in Scandinavia in the north. Um, Something I was going to ask you, Kubi, because I don't know if I actually know the answer to this personally. But would you say that you got into like neo-paganism, paganism through Wicca initially, and then got more into the Celtic?
Oh, interesting question. I'm not actually sure. I remember buying a load of Wiccan books when I was very young, like
Yeah.
12 or 13. Um,
Because I was thinking about this just the other day because I was thinking about doing like a deep dive into Wicca, especially as we go into like autumn. Mostly just out of
yeah,
interest. I mean, I like knowing things, and I don't know that much about Wicca, admittedly. But in theory, it is the most popular neo-pagan religion in the world. But I
yeah.
actually can't tell you if I've ever met someone who introduces themselves as a Wiccan.
Interestingly, are they ashamed?
Yeah, I just don't know. Maybe they don't float in the neo-pagan circles, and they kind of keep to their covens and whatnot. But I don't know.
I, it's interesting because I would have said Wiccan is the definition of neo-pagan because it came about with the movement, the Gerald Gardner movement of was it the 1970s, where he kind of made paganism quite popular,
Right.
but he mashed a load of new age stuff into it that wasn't sort of say traditional of like Celtic paganism. Um, so a lot of the books now that I find that I'm reading, especially when I'm researching, I almost have to pick and extract Wiccan stuff out
Yeah.
of Celtic pagan stuff. They often quite often mashed together with New Age stuff, which isn't technically accurate, but we don't want to be boring about it. Um, but I think Wicca's a wonderful gateway drug to
Yeah. That's why I've
to,
always
to
described it.
yeah, because it's sort of it's an introduction into working with the earth and working with magic and energy and ritual, of course. Um, and then I guess from there, people, they start digging around about the roots of it. Like, what was the original inspirations for it? And they'll probably end up finding the Druids and the Celtic stuff and the Nordic pagan stuff. So yeah, really good gateway to it all, I think.
Yeah, I think, this again is something I would like to break down in like a longer video once I want to like tackle this subject because, what is the umbrella? Is paganism the umbrella? Is it neo-paganism that the umbrella that everything else follows under? Um,
Mm,
but I don't know if it's necessarily even umbrella. I think we more or less have like little centers of nucleuses that are attached to one another. And I don't think there is like a central nucleus necessarily, because I think
yeah.
you have like neo-paganism and then you have like reconstructionism and then you have Wicca and then you
Mm.
have witchcraft, which isn't Wicca, which is like aligned with everything kind of in the middle, like a weird Venn diagram. And then you have like more of the occult, and then you have, more of like the neo-druidic practices. Like everything kind of floats around in the same space, but is kind
Right.
of its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the important thing that it's all kind of respected for its own individual kind of offerings, the things that it brings to the world. That's really cool.
I
And
wouldn't.
I do find like any sort of pagan events, y- I do find that there's a lot of Wiccans there as well as people that don't identify as Wiccan. Yeah,
Yeah.
so it kind of brings everyone together. I just earthy folk. I'd love it if we could
Earthy
create a
folk.
new umbrella, just earthy folk. Because there's like my partner's a gardener and he describes himself as a pagan, but doesn't believe like in the literal sense of the gods and things like
Mm.
that. So there's a whole other branch of paganism as well, which isn't necessarily anything to do with the kind of belief of yeah, the gods and agnosticism within it.
Yeah, well, and I think I've been reflecting on this a lot lately is the difference between like a polytheistic belief system and an animist belief system.
Yeah.
And I would say I meet more individuals that are probably animists, but they don't. know anything more than polytheist. And I think, polytheist is a little bit more direct than people realize. Like, you are focusing
Mm.
more on the individual gods of the religion.
And what's
Um,
the definition of polytheism?
Polytheism is just a belief in multiple deities. And so monotheism is
Okay.
mono, single deity. Polytheism, you believe in multiple deities. And then animism is more the belief in the godliness and the spirit in all things. And
Like the
so,
yeah,
yeah,
like
like everything has spirit.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Like the animation of spirit in
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. And so I think, things like druidism typically is a bit more animist.
Yeah.
Shamanism is definitely animist. Like there still is room for the gods. Like I would even say like Buddhism is technically animism because they believe in like
Mm.
the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, and then various spirits and stuff. But then it's all still kind of centered around the self and the mind and all that. So and the
Yeah.
personal journey to enlightenment. A true polytheist, more Hellenic polytheism. I mean, it's in the name. So like the reconstruction of Greek beliefs are more traditionally polytheist.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's so many branches, aren't there? But
Yeah.
the one thing that I find so exciting about all of this is that either way, people are getting in contact with something beyond themselves
Right.
and nature in a more meaningful way, whatever they want to call it, and however it kind of shows up in their life. That for me
Yeah.
is so groundbreaking.
Yeah, and definitely pulling it back to our conversation today with like the equinoxes and stuff. Like something I noticed, and one of the reasons I definitely wanted to talk about this episode is even here in back in the states where I'm at right now. All what's happening right now is the festivals. Like this time of
Mm.
year, you have Renaissance festivals, you have state fairs, and you have like local county fairs as well, and like village fairs and stuff. Like I
Yeah.
was just driving to see my parents, and I was driving through this little town, and they're having like what did they call it, like horse fest or something like that. And it's like the entire middle street of the town gets closed down. And then where I'm from, my original town, Lebanon, Ohio, they have Apple Fest at the end of the month, and it's
Oh,
like the entire street gets closed off, and there's vendors and there's fresh fruit and produce and
yeah.
snacks and games and music and stuff. And I think it's because one, the weather cools off this time of year, so it's better to get out. But also, in theory, like this is also when the farms are producing the last harvest.
Yeah.
And so this is when things are in abundance. And so you have these festivals to celebrate the abundance. And I think that's ingrained in us as a species that this time of
Mm.
year you have festivals. And I think that's
Yeah.
both like an ancestral memory, but also because of just the natural cycles that exist around us that we live in.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true. It's almost like because we haven't got those rituals in the communities anymore, that's the nearest thing you have, isn't it? So a festival is almost like a ritual, a coming together to celebrate a certain theme or something like that. It's so true. I mean, we have we have a wonderful festival here, the Scythe Festival, which like a scythe, it's like the thing the Grim Reaper carries. And they do competitions with who can cut the strip of grass faster, the man with the scythe or the man with the lawnmower. It's like real kind
That's
of
like some
country
American stuff too. Is it?
festival.
Oh gosh, is it Paul Bunyan? But there's like a guy that like an American mythos is a guy that
Yeah,
like chops down trees with an axe, and then a dude that comes through with like a machine or whatever, and it's just like
yeah.
I bet I could duck down more trees than the machine, and it's like one of the great American parables.
Oh, it's so great. It's such a wholesome time of year. And oh my gosh, I love it because you have all these stores, all these agricultural produces, like the cheese fairs. Oh my goodness. I've literally stocked up on truffle cheese from an agricultural festival I went to last weekend because it's just so good. And I don't know where you find that stuff in shops.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, like nowadays, I mean, I've said this for years, mostly in private to people, but like to me, it's like how fucking crazy is it that we can eat a pineapple in December? Like,
Yeah.
you can go to the store and buy a pineapple. It's like that is baffling. But in the past,
Mm.
and the not so distant past, like having fresh produce was a thing you didn't have all year. You only
Yeah.
had it at certain times, and the harvest this festival was the final time to get good produce. And then
Yeah.
this would also
Yeah.
be the time to start canning, pickling, jarring things, and preserving things,
Totally.
deciding what animals to slaughter, what animals to keep. And so this is also a huge time to slaughter
Mm.
the animals and and dry the meat or whatever you're going to do with it.
Yeah. They'd
Um,
be weighing their
yeah.
produce as well. So it'd be a time of sort of realizing whether you're going to make it through the winter. Like that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because they can't just go down to Sainsbury's or Morrison's or the local shop down the road. they've got to, like really weigh up what have we actually produced this year in the harvest, and are we going to make it through enough to feed the whole family through winter? It's kind of a whole
Yeah.
different way of thinking, isn't it? That lack mentality.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for me, that's one of the most important lessons. I've definitely softened my edges in the sense of like, thinking paganism is the biggest shit in the world. Like I fucking love it. I love pagan celebration. But I think there's so much we can learn just from the historical peoples.
Yeah.
Because obviously, when we're saying that people 200-300 years ago were, having these festivals and stuff like that and thinking this way, they weren't necessarily pagan. They might have had pagan ideas in their mind because of what survived from
Mhm.
the Christianization. But for the most part, these communities were Christian with, folk customs. That's what it became, was the folk customs. And so
Yeah.
this is part of our, European identity, our world identity of, celebrating this time of year with these festivals. And so I think that's why I would argue, especially this time of year. Now, like when we get to Yule, like Yule definitely is more of like a, dark magic, let's do some
Yeah.
crazy shit kind of stuff. And so, same with like Samhain and whatnot. But
Oh
like
yeah.
this time of year, the September, the harvest, the festivals, just enjoy them. Enjoy the festivals. To
Absolutely.
me, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about doing some kind of ritual or ceremony, because the
Yeah.
ritual and ceremony is just celebrating your ancestry and what our ancestors have always done this time of year.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking as well, for our ancestors, it probably would have been a time of them getting the first colds of the year. We do get that a little bit still, don't we? When the season changes and it plunges into cold, there's like a wave of colds that go around. And I guess that's the whole thing of returning back inwards, sort of going into a period of rest after all that hard work with the harvest. And I had someone come up to me the other day, and they started sneezing, and they were like, "Has anyone else got a cold since the weather's dipped? Because it's got a little bit colder here in England the last week." And then we were all like, "Nah, we haven't got a cold yet." And she was like, "Oh, why not?" She was like, "It's the time of the Cold Goose Fair." And I was like, "What?" And apparently, there's this folk tradition called the Goose Fair Cold, where everyone would have traditionally gone to this goose fair locally around here and caught a cold off each other. So now if someone starts sneezing, they're like, "Oh, it's the old it's the old goose
Oh my
cold, the
gosh.
goose fair cold."
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like
that's some
so
old
funny
stuff
how
right
these
there.
really old stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah,
I wonder how
what
far
way of
back that
thinking
goes.
about it. Yeah, same. I'd love to go to a goose fair. I think it'd be hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I know so many people that are like my friend group here in like Kentucky. I think like half of them have gotten sick with something, but it's only been like a day or two thing. And it's
Yeah.
so funny because they always mention it's when they went to this festival or this fair or something like that. They always pick it up.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that is interesting.
I guess that does connect with the Mabon story as well, about him going into this imprisonment around this time of year in order to rest and regain himself for the year ahead
Mm,
next year. Um, Another big thing to think about is with the equinoxes, that's when we're sort of holding the year in equal balance of light and dark. So it's an
yeah,
equal measure. And that can be really interesting. I always find it's almost like a period of conflict within people, within themselves, where they still want to be outside, but it's getting a little bit too cold,
yeah,
and the serotonin levels are dipping, and so they're starting to feel more introvert as well.
yeah.
Um, yeah, it is an interesting time of year, that holding the light and dark in equal balance. Um, yeah, I I mean, are you a fan of the autumn, Jacob? Are
Oh,
you
I
an autumn
absolutely
person?
love it. Yeah, this
You
is
love
my.
it.
Oh yeah, this is my time of year. I've always loved it. Like
Yeah.
it's like a combination, like the temperature, the smells. Like I can wake up in the morning and it's like brisk in the morning, and I can smell like the autumn air. I'm like, that's fine wine right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely drink way more hot drinks this time of year than I do cold. I definitely have not drank enough water because I just love having a hot drink on a cool afternoon or a cool
Yeah.
morning. Um, yeah, I don't know. And maybe that's, shifted. Like maybe our ancestors didn't necessarily feel that way, or maybe they did.
Mm,
At the time of the harvest, maybe this was a good time, like, the time of abundance before you get into the darker months.
yeah.
And so again, I think maybe there is like an ancestral component to that, like in our blood, like, so many people love the autumn season. And maybe it's because of like fucking generations of people that are like, this is the time of abundance. And it's like in our DNA,
Yeah.
it's like the time of abundance is here.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
I
but I
mean,
embrace it.
with the Celtic Ogham, which is the tree Ogham thing that I'm always referencing. around this time of year, you've got the apple. You sort of start exploring the connection with the apple as well. And obviously, this time of year, the apples are falling everywhere, and the apple represents abundance. And that idea of sort of being provided with everything that you could ever need from life. So
Yeah.
it's connected a lot with Avalon, and the Isle of Avalon, which means the Isle of Apples, and this sort of
How does it?
idea where, yeah, because in the original tale of Avalon, it talks about this place of sort of everlasting youth where the fruit trees reproduce themselves naturally, and the birds are always singing, and it's like a land of abundance, as well as the entrance to the underworld. So it's an
Mm,
interesting, you know, a mix of both. But the apple becomes a very important thing, and apparently they have this thing called the Feast of the Apples here, which I've never seen myself. I've been here
it's time
four
to bring
years,
it
and
back.
yeah, maybe it's time to bring it back because it's. I read an article about it, the Feast of Avalon, which is about the abundance of the apple trees on the land, and sort of using it as a symbol of healing, renewal, regeneration, things like that,
I
and
just like
immortality.
I'm picturing like some area in Glastonbury, like somewhere maybe in the Abbey, of having like a big long table where everyone in the village gets on the table, and it's just like a big feast of apples.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's got
it's
to
bring it
happen,
back.
hasn't it? It's
Yeah.
got to happen. Imagine that everything candlelit and
Completely like the
yes.
Hobbit, like the Shire, like little banners and everything.
Stewed apples, sir.
Yeah.
Be
A
lovely.
bit of apple cider.
Oh, I love it. It's the best time of year for stuff like that.
Well, that's
And
what Somerset is still known for, its apple cider, right? Like it's
oh
yeah,
gosh, yeah.
like in this the hard cider and everything.
Yeah, it's all cider and mead here. And oh, one of my favorite things about autumn is the mulled spiced things like mulled spice wine, mulled spice cider.
Mm,
Oh, so good. And I don't know what it's like where you are, but the possibility for foraging at the moment is just so good. Like the
yeah.
hedgerows are just full of blackberries and rose hips
Well,
and
this is also the time of year you start harvesting magic mushrooms too.
yes, yes, yes. After the first, what is it? After the first frost?
I think it was after the first frost, yeah. Which I
Yeah.
mean also could be, when is the first frost you think typically in the UK?
Um June. No,
At
it's
least July.
I mean it's getting pretty chilly now, but it's not frosty yet. I would say maybe next month we might see our first frost.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
again, it's interesting because so many people in America are getting into these modern pagan practices today. And I always like to remind people that what we base this on is the
Mhm.
seasonal cycles of places like the UK and Scandinavia. So it's a bit
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
here. We don't see the first frost until maybe late November.
Oh, so
Um,
lucky.
yeah, yeah. So it is different. Like our growing season is just different here. Like I was just
Yeah.
talking to my grandfather about this other day. He's growing tomatoes in his back garden,
I
and I
thought
was
you were gonna say he's growing mushrooms then.
I wish, I wish.
Oh
Um,
yes.
but he was telling me, he's like, well, I was asking, when's the last harvest? When's the last time you can pick from this? And he's like, oh, I can usually until December around here.
Yeah.
And it's like, so he's still picking fresh tomatoes until December.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that just goes to show the difference, doesn't it? Really different seasonal. Yeah. I was actually thinking about mushrooms the other day, and I was
You've
thinking
never
how
thought about mushrooms before.
so unlike me. And I was just reflecting on how intelligent that is of the earth to grow with a natural abundance of medicinal mushrooms, which are known to increase serotonin levels right
Mm,
when the season is starting to dip in
yeah.
daylight. It's like a natural solution, natural medicine, in reflection of the season. Not
Yeah.
that we're recommending it because
You would
we
never
can't.
do that.
We would never do
I don't
such.
have some in my car right now.
I might be on them right now.
Kubi, I thought we agreed to microdose this episode.
But it's the perfect time for microdosing and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
You
I mean,
know?
you're much more attuned to this than most, and even more
Mhm.
attuned than I am. But the digital nomad lifestyle does not mean plants are part of your life very well. You can't
Yeah.
grow anything or anything like that. But I constantly reflect on how, especially younger people in society, we know so little about plants. I'm
Mm,
staying with my grandparents right now, and all my ancestors were farmers to some degree, like had some garden or some farm. And
yeah.
my grandfather's just sitting there telling me about all this cross pollination, creating special breeds of this, that, the other thing, and it just made me shockingly realize how little I know about plant life and gardening and farming.
Yeah.
And it's like this will bite us in the ass one day.
I know it's quite sad, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
last and I know what you mean, that feeling. It's almost like a feeling of guilt and shame when you
yeah.
sort of like our my grandparents had allotments and they used to grow all their own stuff, and I just think it's so lost, isn't it? But I've actually, interestingly, this last month, me and my housemate have rented out an allotment space because we thought, there's no time like the now to
Right.
start learning how to harvest your own food. Um, I have also been reminded by several people that now is also the wrong time because it's the worst time of the year to start growing anything. But we've got this great big plot of land in Glastonbury, and bought Charles Dowding's veg journal, which goes through like a month by month what to plant, how to do
Well,
no
that's cool.
digs, and kind of giving nutrients back to the soil.
What was the
And
name of
it
that?
felt, oh, I'll look, I'll show it right here. It's
Yeah,
right here.
yeah.
Where is it? Charles Dowding veg journal. It's
Ch-
this.
Charles Downing.
Charles
Dowding?
Dowding. Yeah,
Dowding.
apparently he's like quite a pioneer of the no dig movement. And I would highly recommend this to any pagans watching.
Yeah,
Not that I can say I've done much work on the allotment
right.
just,
But get your
but
hands in the dirt.
to get your hands in the dirt, because we talk about our connection with the earth, and for many of us it's a spiritual thing, and it's done through the gods or through rituals or creating altars and spending time with nature. But actually giving back to nature is a
Mm.
massive part that's missing probably for a lot of pagans, certainly for me, not having a clue really of how to grow things and to tend to the earth on that level. So yeah, maybe for if anyone cares to join me on this plight of deepening their connection to the old gods and the old ways, I'd recommend getting an allotment as well.
That would also be an interesting like title for like a book or something like Gods of the Dirt or Gods of the Soil or something like that, and kind of go into
Yeah.
like the mixture of paganism and growing things. It would be an interesting book. Whoever's out there and likes the name of that title, you can have it unless I get to it first. Gods of the Soil.
Yes, definitely. It's out there. Go, go, go.
Yeah. I can only write things so fast. Which, if I can shamelessly plug, I am nearly done with my book, which takes place in Glastonbury. So I have about 4 more chapters to write. If it doesn't get any longer, it's going to be about 350 to 400 pages. And it will hopefully release around Samhain time. But I want to take the editing process as it is because, there's been the editing process can be as long as you want. You can edit a
Mm,
thing literally until the end of the world.
yeah.
Um, but I wanted to give it the time it needs. I think, sorry if you can hear dogs right now, but that's part of filming outside. Um, can you hear them?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Oh, very good. I figured, yeah, they were just like piercing right through. But that's part of nature. Part of the gardening process is the animals, right?
The hounds of the land.
Yeah, the hounds of the land.
Oh,
Um,
that's really exciting about your book.
yeah, I'm
That's
really
that.
excited, and I think the thing I like about this book is it's given me a way to share the things I've learned on my spiritual journey these last few years in a fictional lens. Like a lot of what happens in the book, most of the things happen in the book are
Mm,
based around the experiences I've had. Like I was just telling Kubi, like while writing, I just realized, holy shit, I have a moment I could talk about like the sweat lodge, and so I've added a sweat lodge part into the book. But it
mm,
combines like my experience in the sweat lodge, but moving it to take place in Glastonbury, and then also combines an experience I had with Estonia. So it's like it's a fictional thing I've set up, but it's still based on my experiences these last few years,
yeah. Yeah.
and experience of other people I know and have met along the way. So really excited to get it out. I hope people enjoy it. It's definitely writing a book is difficult, but also a really beautiful process at the same time.
So, so good. It's almost like it feels like it's going to be a bit of a memoir or a kind of autobiography, but hidden through other characters.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing that'll be interesting for like this and then like the next podcast is it starts about 2 weeks before Samhain. So the main character arrives in
Oh,
Glastonbury 2 weeks before Samhain. And I'll share a little bit here because you were kind of mentioning how Glastonbury is like the Isle, or the Avalon is the Isle of Apples, but also the entrance to the other world. And
mm.
I kind of bring that into a part in the story. So like there's like one of the main moments is he kind of was like walking around the tour, and he sees one of the mysterious characters, which you'll very quickly realize is just supposed to be Odin because his name is Owen.
Ah, very
uh,
discreet. Yeah.
yeah, and he's doing like a ceremony near Grog and Magog. Uh,
Golden Magog.
Gog and
Or have
Magog.
you
It's right in the
renamed it
book. It's right
Grog?
in the book. And then I kind of use those as like the entrance to the other world in the book. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and
amazing.
there's like a ceremony around there. So yeah, I try to bring as much of the Glastonbury elements into the story, both
Oh,
historical and mythological, and then
it's
mix
quite
that.
historic. That is
Yeah.
actually quite historical. Gog and Magog are believed they would have been a row of giant oaks that led
Mhm.
all the way up to the Tor that were cut down for farming. So you're pretty much spot on. It is the entrance to the other world.
I did do my research.
That's so exciting. And what
And
a
it
great time to bring it out when people want to be getting cozy around a fire and reading a book with their pumpkin spice lattes.
yeah. Now, how do you feel about, well, how do you feel about autumn? You asked me, like, are you just as like, oh, this is a magical time of year? Or are you like, ah, shit?
I used to really struggle with winter because I used to get really bad seasonal affective disorder.
Mm.
But I cured it with magic mushrooms.
Oh, no, everything, all roads lead to mushrooms.
And honestly, I've never had it since. I did a really big journey once with them in the autumn, and ever since then, it's like my body just learned how to handle the darker months. And now I really look forward to it. I don't get tired or lethargic anymore, and if I do, I kind of reframe it rather than being like, "Oh, no, I haven't got the same, like, high energy as summer." I'm like, "Oh, beautiful. I get to get cozy and read a book and go for some
Yeah.
slow walks in nature." So I really enjoy the invitation to slow down, and I think that's a
Yeah.
big part of working healthily with the seasons
Yeah.
and being in sort of good relation with them is seeing the advantage to each one and seeing what the land is calling of us and asking of us with the changes. So I love it. I absolutely love autumn as much as I love all the others. The only season I don't love is that stupid little time of year between January and March where it's just rain and it's like you're not even a season anymore. You're just sludge.
Yeah, like for me, a proper winter, I need snow. Like if there's snow outside, like I'm like, yes, this is
Yeah,
winter. But if it literally just rains every
that's
single day,
miserable.
that's just not enjoyable.
It's not the one, is it? But it's so nice. I mean, like, I can't wait for that first evening sat around the log burner. And oh, I love all of that. Love it, love it. And the colors of autumn are just so beautiful.
I was going to ask in Glastonbury, when did the colors begin to change? Because I can see out your window that it's still green at the moment.
It's still green, but actually it's starting to change. So I went walking around the Abbey just the other day and I've noticed there's a lot of kind of rustic tones coming in. Yeah, it's really exciting. I'm kind of ready for it, I think.
So, paint me a brain picture, like Glastonbury in autumn. Like, what's I'm assuming like the tourism dies down quite a bit, like the weekend
Yes.
voyeurs, and everyone. It's mostly just the people that live there, right, at this time of year.
Yeah, so you see the hardcore Glastonbury folk, because they're the ones that are
Wait, I
left
haven't seen the
behind.
hardcore ones.
No, no, no. Most people in Glastonbury throughout summer and spring are tourists or people that are just here traveling through, or they're kind of looking for a bit of healing in the warmer months. The hardcore folk are the ones that are left here after Samhain. So once we get past that, that's the streets empty out. There's barely anyone around. Everyone willingly, I think, goes into this very internal space in Glastonbury. It's a very seasonal town, very seasonal. So most people go and work sort of very inwardly and they do a lot of shadow work in the winter months. And you don't sometimes see people until spring again, which is quite nice because it gives you permission to sort of go into the cave as well.
Yeah, but are
So
there?
I love it.
I mean, you have Samhain there. I mean, we're going to talk more about that next month. But is
Yeah.
there? Obviously during the summer, there's a lot more events because there's more people in town.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what kind of events would you see this time of year if there are kind of workshops or something like that?
Not many for Mabon. I mean, there's normally a ceremony up on the Tor at sunrise, or at least people go and see the sunrise. Chalice Well sometimes do a lovely ritual ceremony around Mabon. I imagine the White Spring will do the same. And then that's it. There's not going to be anything major, really. Samhain is our last big festival celebration. There's a lot going on for that, but yeah, we'll talk about that more in the next one, I guess.
Yeah, the next episode is where it gets spooky.
Yeah,
It's
the entrance into the other world opens. Yeah.
something else I was going to ask you, and this is an interesting thing because this is also coming from when I spend time here in Kentucky. Typically, I'm spending
Mhm.
time with like the normies, so to speak. I'm visiting friends and family from the
Yeah.
past self. So it's always interesting because I usually spend every autumn. back in the States. I've been traveling on and off now for about 4 years in total,
Oh,
and
wow, that's a
I'm
long
always
time.
yeah, yeah. Full time the last two, but previously I'd spent a couple summers in Germany, and then I would always come
Mm,
back in the autumn, and so it's always been interesting to reflect on myself coming back into autumn, speaking with the normies. It gets an interesting mirror of the things
yeah,
I'm thinking of, the things they're thinking of, and seeing where even things compare.
yeah.
And talking to the normies, one of the things that seems to be a consistent theme is people fear this time of year because they typically have a bad month. Like whether it's
Mm.
September, October, November, like I could do a poll probably. Most people I talk to will say that September, October, and November typically becomes a bad month for them.
Isn't that interesting? What is that about?
Have you ever noticed that?
Um, like I said, I guess most people start noticing seasonal affective disorder around
Mm,
September, October. So I guess actually for people that do really struggle with the serotonin drop, that would be that I can imagine that pole being quite high. But
yeah.
personally, I don't experience it anymore. Yeah, so yeah, I just love it now.
Yeah, I do like, and maybe the definition of bad month, for me, this has definitely changed,
Mm,
because I could look back and say that, around November every year, there is something, it always seems like something bad happens.
yeah,
But, maybe changing the definition of bad into something challenging that makes us sets the tone for how the next year is going to be.
yeah,
And so I think maybe, that'd be a piece of advice. If you feel this way, if you feel that you are given something challenging this time of year, see it as a challenge, even though
yeah.
it'll suck to go through. I'm trying to think of like a good example, but like, yeah, no, here's a good one. So when I decided to sell everything and start living this digital nomad life, was 2 Novembers ago. I
Mm,
was doing a string of events with my nonprofit. I think I did like 5 events in a row, literally bouncing from one to the other, putting on all these gatherings and events, and it was a pretty hard month. And
yeah.
one of the final events, I put on a really intense Odinic ritual, and it was through that ritual that I kind of got through like what's the next thing
Oh,
on this kind
what happened? Sorry, what happened in the ritual?
of. This is the
Have to know.
one you have to know. I've probably mentioned this to you. And this was the one where we did the Alfheidnar ritual. So I wasn't the ritual lead. We had someone that was representing Odin, and then we had two people that were representing Valkyries behind him. And then I was
Mm,
in charge of the Wolf Warriors, so the Alfheidnar. And so I took like a group of like 9 men, and we like separated ourselves about midday, and we just did a lot of prep, a lot of conversation, a lot of practicing the songs we were going to chant, and just getting ourselves into that warrior mindset.
mm,
And then at the time of the ritual, it was dark. We were in the mountains of like North Carolina for this. So surrounded by snow-capped mountains around us already. It snowed like the night before. It was beautiful.
oh,
Um, and we're just in this massive mountain valley. And then like they were like, all right, it's time for the ritual. And we go out, and we were all in like a tight little circle. And everyone went, moments before we're laughing, having a great time. And then it turned so serious so quick. And I just started doing like my thing, and getting them into the trance mindset, and they became beast. And I mean, they were howling, they were growling, they were drooling, they were walking on all fours, like crawling at the ground, digging at the earth, and all this stuff. And
oh, love it.
it
Yeah.
was intense. It was the most intense, intense ritual I've ever done. And at the same time, it scared me because there was so much power behind it, and I really had to sit with that and think,
Mm,
okay, what do I do here? How do I move forward? And the thing that came through was I have to move up the camera. Um, the thing that came through was that I needed to sell everything, and then I spent the next month, like basically preparing myself to take this Odinic journey,
yeah.
and going through all of your stuff. That's what made November so hard and into December, is going through all my memories, all my possessions, and choosing what to keep, letting go of old relationships, old friendships.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was really heavy. And so, but all the time now, people always say, how jealous they are of, the lifestyle I live and the journeys and the
Yeah.
travels. And like, of course, I was jealous of these things when I saw them before too, but it took a great sacrifice to live this way.
That I could feel that in every word that you said.
Yeah.
It's that powerful thing of like letting
Yeah.
go so that life can fill your hand with something greater, And it takes so much courage to take that leap in life because it comes with loss, letting go is loss and it is grief. And we attach ourselves to even things like material things that you would have been getting rid of, right? To
Yeah.
You can't take that stuff with you on the road. Yeah, it must have been
Yeah.
a really brave time for you. Did you say it was around the autumn as well?
Yeah, it was November. It had to have been it was actually probably Samhain, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think it was our Samhain festival. So
Wow.
it had to be really close to then. And so then yeah, November was the planning process. I think I had
Yeah.
like another event. That's when I like went up to Canada and had an event up there. Um, and then came back down, which I don't even know. Like Canada was wild too. I'm not sure if you ever saw, but that was the one where in the middle of a ritual, there was a meteor that crashed to the earth.
What?
Yeah. I mean, it literally landed in the earth in the middle of our ritual.
Get
And it
out.
was bizarre. So it wasn't a very big event. Like our Canada event, I think was 9 people.
Yeah.
And we were in this beautiful, like isolated cabin on this lake. It was already snow covered. It was like mid-November. And we were just in the middle of like opening the space and like hailing the gods and things. And then we see the sky flash white. And we look and we just see this like fireball like shoot across the sky and it like
Oh my
landed like
God.
10 miles away. Um, yeah, it was wild. And like we looked it up on the news and like, yeah, it was like in the news, like within like, yeah, 10 miles of where we were, this meteor just crashed into the earth.
Oh my God, it's like one of those moments where the gods respond.
Yeah, like I think we're sitting there like, what do we do now?
That's so powerful. Gosh. But yeah, I think you're so right that these real powerful rituals can be invoked in a much more stronger way at this time of year because like the land is doing, it's letting go of stuff. The leaves are falling, everything's
Mm.
being let go of. And if you can do that and make room for something else to come in through ritual, that's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's again, like, we're starting, we're talking about September right now. September is light, just enjoy the festivals, go out, go to Apple Fest, go to Horse Fest, go to Frog Fest. I don't care.
Yeah.
Go to a fest, enjoy the abundance, get some cheese, have some nice mulled wine. That's what September is about. But I think, yeah, once we cross that threshold into
Into
Samhain,
fall.
into the deep autumn, this is when the
Yeah.
work begins. And just like you said,
Yeah.
the analogy of the tree is wonderful because this time of year, the leaves turning colors is beautiful. But what comes after the beauty is this letting go.
It's the
And so,
death.
yeah, like I think every year there's something that we need to let go of
Totally.
so we
And
can make way for the new.
to reflect back on what you were saying earlier about people struggling with this time of year, I think that it's possibly that people are leaning away from doing that death. If you lean towards the death of the season and accept that you do have to let go of stuff and you do have to sort of to surrender more into rest and more into shadow work and more into the internal, it can be a really enjoyable experience. It's that resistance to the season. It's when humans forget that we are animals and we are the seasons and we
Yeah.
are the earth and we are nature and we try and do something else. We go against the grain of what the season is asking of us. That's when
Yeah.
suffering happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, especially after just doing the Vision Quest, as we talked about last episode, was a way of looking at everything
Yeah.
and silencing all the voices, all the patterns, all the systems that have been a part of you, and seeing what remains when it's just you, and
Yeah.
seeing what baggage do you still carry around. And I have noticed now, it's been almost a month since my Vision Quest. Holy shit. I can't believe that.
Oh my
And
God.
I think it has been a month. Holy shit. What?
That's
Life
gone
is whack.
fast. Yeah. It's gone
Yeah.
really fast since
And
we were
like
last
I've
speaking.
I've been so much more eager to let things go.
Yeah.
Even past grievances with people. If I've had issues with people in the past, I'm like, it's whatever, man. It's in the past. Like, and
Yeah.
it's such a subtle change.
Yeah.
But yeah, even like last night, I was just hanging out with some friends and there's this lamp I love. I saved it from when I sold everything because I love this lamp, but I haven't used it in 2 years. And I'm just sitting at my friend's house and they're like sitting in darkness because they don't have a lamp. We're just like sitting there chilling. And they like turn the TV on. So there's like a little light. And we're just like,
Oh
I
my
feel like a bunch of gremlins. And I was like,
gosh.
I have a lamp. I will bring it to you. Like I love
Oh, look at that. The ultimate surrender, giving up your
right.
lamp.
I love that lamp. It's like got the nice Edison bulb that like warms and stuff, and so you dim it.
Oh,
Yeah, but I was like, no, they need a lamp. I have a lamp. I will provide because I don't know. Even that, I'm not attached to anymore. It's weird.
look at that. You're a good egg, Jacob. A good egg.
Now I have even less possessions.
Oh, no, it's nice to let go of stuff, definitely. It is almost like a second spring clean in that sense.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the spring clean, um, shoot, yeah, we'll get back around to this when we our year anniversary of the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like I don't know, just like you said, just making room for things to grow. I think that's a really powerful sentiment to reflect on at this time of year. Like you
Yeah.
might necessarily not know what's going to grow next year, what you're allowing that. But someone that's, I received a really lovely message from someone today talking about, how visibly I've changed in the last few years, with the late weight loss and stuff, and then
Yeah.
how they can tell like spiritually I've changed, which is very humbling. But that's good. Important lesson here is I didn't necessarily do things thinking that I was going to change or expecting change. I just shed things. I did the work,
Mm.
and then the things grew, and they grew naturally. And I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sort of everyone sort of has that natural like moment where you just know it's time to
Yeah.
do something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So much. I don't know how, like, your struggles with anxiety and things like that. That's been one of my big struggles. And I think a lot
Mm.
of anxiety is built up from things that we just refuse to let go in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, massively so. It's almost like the body's way of letting you know that your nervous system isn't enjoying whatever you're currently still
Yeah.
engaging with, isn't it? That is basically the definition of anxiety. Yeah.
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 So wrapping that back into the equinox to close things off, what would be your final advice for people because this episode's going to release like
Mm.
basically on the equinox, if not around it.
Oh,
So,
no.
yeah. So pulling that into, what people can do now as we prepare for
Mm.
Samhain, what would be your final advice?
So I would say one of the loveliest kind of rituals that you can do this time of year is to go out and forage. So go and find the blackberries on the hedgerows. There's only a few left this time of year, actually. Or, bake an apple pie from the orchards, or make some elderberry syrup to see through the winter. So it's
Mm,
a time of like nourishing, doing things that are wholesome, things that can kind of carry you through the winter and to kind of reflect back. So your altar, I would say, to decorate it with berries and nuts and offerings and little statues like to the like foresty animals as well, like anything that's kind of naturey. And to think about how you can bring self-care into those rituals. So what can you do as the nights draw to a close and the daylight gets less and less? um and to just enjoy, for me, rituals in September and October are just things like reading a book and going for walk in leaves and just tuning into the season and slowing it all down. Yeah.
yeah. Something, not necessarily my peak advice here, but one piece of advice as someone who used to play the fuck out of video games. Like I've played so many video games in my life, but not so much anymore.
Yeah.
And this time of year is the time most video games come out. It's like the main push of video games is between September and December, mostly for the holidays.
Right.
And then we just had like the movie season is like the summer into the autumn as well. And I think they're not necessarily by design, but I think by coincidence, there are so many things that exist in the autumn to distract us now. We feel
Mhm.
encouraged to go inside. The days are getting shorter, the nights are getting cooler. So we want to cozy up to Netflix. We want to play that video game. There's so many options for distraction. And I'm not saying that, this time of year, I think we can start entering that hibernation, but I think true hibernation is December. Like I can't blame anyone for hibernating in December into January, March
Yeah.
when it's nasty out. Like that's the time
Yeah.
to fully go into the hibernation. So if you want to play your video games, if you want to watch your movies, do that in the winter. But this time of year, do not waste because I'm so sick and tired of people saying like autumn doesn't last long enough. Like we never see the leaves; they all fall down so quick. It's like no, you are just distracted and you don't go out and enjoy it. I measured
Yeah.
last year from the first time I saw an orange leaf to the final time that all the leaves fell off the tree was seriously like 12 weeks. It was
Right.
so long.
It's
And
a
it's
season.
and so like I was bartending this time last year, and so people would come in like, "Well, it's too autumn, all the leaves are falling down." I'm like, "Shut up! When's the last time you hiked?" I was like, "I've hiked 12 times this autumn." Like, shut up.
Yeah, it's about getting out there and enjoying that crisp,
Yeah,
fresh air as well, isn't it?
yeah.
Definitely. It's a bit of
Especially if
both.
you, and even like right now, like the cafe I'm at, like most people aren't sitting inside, most people are outside, and it's like that's what we need to do. Like even if you have to work like me, like I come here to work, at least do it outside as much as we can. Enjoy it, like you said, go foraging, but don't fall into the winter hibernation yet.
Yeah.
It's just so easy for us to do that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. A little reminder to don't hibernate just yet. Get back out there. Put
Yeah,
your shoes back on.
yeah. Yeah, don't wrap up too quickly. Yeah, and just enjoy it, man. And like,
Yeah.
I love this season. I savor every moment of it. And this is the only time of year I try to hold on with dear life to slow it down as much as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Here's to that.
Yeah. And then yeah, I think my final piece of advice is enjoy the festivals. I think a lot of people, I still get comments all the time about people feeling lonely, feeling isolated, practicing paganism today. This is the time of year, all of autumn, but even in September, you can start getting into just the customs of your area, the festivals, because that's what your pagan ancestors were doing. They were going to festivals. They were enjoying the harvest, and you can still do that now.
Absolutely. I love that. It's such a good incentive and a good reminder, isn't it? To go back out and to enjoy life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Make it wholesome.
isn't that what religion should be about? Is
Yeah,
enjoying life to the fullest and the most wholesome.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the best way we can end this episode, honestly.
Yeah. The next episode is going to be all about death
Yeah.
and ancestors and the shadow
Yeah.
realm.
Until the undead come out of the earth and crawl us back in. So let's enjoy it before that
Yeah,
happens.
the last hurrah.
But it is kind of true. Like, yeah, before the work happens. We always have our most spooky events too in the autumn. Like every time, I don't know why, it just like kind of happens that way. Like all of my nonprofits event end up dealing with death. And like we have bones
Ooh.
and fire everywhere and stuff. And then, it's very opposite to like wearing flower crowns and dancing around a maypole.
Yeah. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, but that's all coming up in the next episode. So we hope to see people then. But until
Yeah.
then, thank you everyone. We hope you have an amazing autumn equinox and enjoy September before death takes us.
Take care.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye.